Good afternoon, and welcome to session 25 of Notes from the Rap. My name is Jared Forte, and this session is the first of a three-part introduction to the creative process. I call it an introduction because I'm not sure exactly how many uh, ways we're going to go into or ways we're going to examine. It's a pretty deep topic. But in this first pass of the subject of the creative process, we're going to break it down into three distinct phases. And as we examine it later, we'll probably go deeper into each of these three phases. So the first phase, and what we're going to talk about today, is ideation, or creating or coming up with cool ideas, good ideas, ideas that are both relevant to the market that you're trying to enter, and also that stay true to or adhere to some sort of standard of quality that exists in the area that you work in. I think the first thing, and the number one thing when you're thinking about how to come up with cool ideas, is you have to get really comfortable with a lot of bad ideas. Usually, 99 and some decimal points after that, in that many cases, you're going to have a lot of bad ideas before you come up with anything good. And the challenge is to be able to endure the process of working through the bad ideas so that you can finally get to something that's good, and to be able to stay the course, to stay focused on the objective that you're trying to create and deal with all of that, because it sucks to suck, and you're going to suck for a while. What normally happens is when you're progressing in a creative process, you have these little mini breakthroughs. You have these little glimmers of hope that let you know perhaps that you're on the right path, that give you some sort of just enough to keep you going. But then that's it. You still have to keep grinding your way through. And an important part is, in this stage, you have to trust the process, whatever that process may be, depending on what you're doing. If you don't have a process, your odds of being creative really are pretty limited. So you have to trust the process, and you also have to suspend judgment. You have to allow yourself to have all these bad ideas without internalizing and judging yourself on the quality of the work that you can do at the early stages of development. I know one of the first things that comes to mind for me when I think about progressing through a creative process is when I first started composing music for the hip hop genre. I had some musical background in the past. I played a little bit, and I thought I had an understanding of what was going on, but in the beginning, there was a steep learning curve when I was just trying to internalize the principles of how this particular type of music came together, and everything that I made was horrible. And even now, if I go in a new direction and I start a new round of creative work, even if it is even in something that I've been exposed to and that I've worked with for over a decade, the first few things that I come up with need to be thrown away. On any given day, when I start coming up and working on ideas for writing, normally the first bit that I come up with has to be thrown away. So you have to be comfortable with the idea that you have, no matter how far you grow as a creative person, there's going to be a lot of your work that you're doing in the process that just needs to be chunked. And you have to be willing to do that without allowing that to affect your motivation. So given the fact that you're not going to be able to sit down, no matter what you're trying to create, chances are you're not going to be able to sit down in one shot, in one take, get exactly what you're looking for. You're going to have to work through some junk. You have to work through some stuff that's not quite there. You have to work through a lot of bad stuff. So given that that is the case, one of the things that's required for the creative process is time and space to create. You have to be able to or create for yourself some time, preferably blocks of time, blocks of uninterrupted time, where you can sit and really work through the process and the problem that you're trying to solve with what you're making. And it's important that you don't underestimate the importance of the space that you're using to create as well. I know that there have been places, physical locations in my history as a creative person that I drew a tremendous amount of inspiration from. And I know that there have been times in my creative process when I have had myself situated in such a way that I know that if I sit down in this spot and I can just groove. That seems sort of here nor there. It's like, it seems like if you're the creative person and the ideas are coming from you, it shouldn't matter where you are. The fact is, it often does. So don't fight that. A lot of this, like as far as the time and the space, we're going to get into on Wednesday session, which is about actually, wow, that's like next Wednesday. I'm out. We're going to be talking about rituals next week, and that kind of ties into this process. So one characteristic of immature creative people, and I count myself in this category with any new creative endeavor I take on. I always revert to being this wailing infant, and I resist the idea initially. It's my initial inclination or default to resist the idea of the labels. I want to be cool. I don't want to be boxed in. There's a certain, I think, an inherent rebellious nature in people who are creative. They want to go against the establishment in some way, and in some cases, they view labels and genres and like categories and standards that are existing within an industry. They view those as the establishment that has to be resisted and shunned, avoided at all costs. But I think that's a mistake, because in many cases, it is that label or that genre that gives you the ability to make some decisions about the work that you're doing. It creates a constraint. And when we resist the idea of constraints, what we're doing is we're resisting the very thing that will make our work have meaning, that will make our work accessible to people, that will give people an entree to the product that we're creating. If you don't have a clear picture or a way for a person to access the thing that you're trying to create, if there isn't a market that you can connect to, that you can communicate and present your idea to in a way that they understand, then your art, your product, whatever it is that you're making is just going to languish in obscurity. No one is going to know it exists. So the idea of genre, what it does is it allows you to make some decisions about what your work is not. It allows you to pick from the universe of possibilities. When you start with a blank page and a blank slate and you can create anything, then the prospect of being able to create anything is an overwhelming and counterproductive state, because it's impossible to get started. So what genre does, what category does, what constraints do is they give you a frame. They say, even if you're painting, the fact that you're painting is a constraint, because now you know you're not drawing with pencil. If you're creating a certain type of music, you know that there's certain conventions that are inherent in that type of music that make it that type of music. So you know that you have a starting point. I know I did a lot of work, my musical background, the time I spent in hip hop, there are a lot of conventions in the genre that are pretty standard, and they allow people to collaborate over space and time because they understand, okay, We're going to do 16 bars in the verse, and it's an 8-bar hook. The structure is set, so everybody understands the structure. So now when I go to create, I understand that this is what I'm going to write. This is how I need to structure my verse. This is how I need to put my story together, because this is the space that I have. So every form of creativity, every market that you enter, there are conventions that are there to help you understand and make some decisions about the way that you should design your product, the way that you should set up your messaging and describe your product to the market. Those things aren't there to box you in for negative reason. They're there to help you make some decisions and to create a handle. And this term was something that was presented by Elizabeth Hyde Stevens. I heard an interview with her on the Creative Pen. She wrote a book called Make Art, Make Money, and she was profiling Jim Henson, who created the Muppets. Now, there's nothing like the Muppets. There were puppets before. He created sort of a new way of expressing, and he opened up all sorts of creative lanes with the art that he made. But it was extremely lucrative because he brought it down to earth. He made the characters something that even a child can relate to. He made the stories were something that were universally loved, and that it made a huge impact. And at one point, the Muppet Show came on Saturday night. It was on all over the world, and it was one of the most watched shows ever. So even though his art was extremely edgy and there was nothing like it before, he had a handle. He had a way. He used the conventions of storytelling. He used the way that he designed his characters in a way that was accessible as a way for people to connect with the work that he was doing. Now, I know we like to be cool, and we like to innovate, and we like to be edgy, but you have to create a handle. You have to use what's there, that the constraints that are there in the work that you're doing, as a starting point, as a way to understand and judge the quality, and not to fall into some sort of abstract delusion about how valuable your work is. Another constraint is the market that you're going in. Who is it that the product is for? You have to decide. You have to make decisions about who this is, who is your audience, who is your customer, who is it that you're trying to serve. And that decision creates a frame that allows you to design your product, to design your solution. Constraints are so important to the creative process, because a lot of times when there isn't a boundary and you can just free form, just think and just go off, that sounds fun. If you can get past your inhibitions and create on that level, it can be a mind-expanding experience. But one thing that, the reason that we have creative ability is to solve problems. That's where our creative ability comes from, and that's where it's most useful, is to solve problems. And what constraints do is they present a problem. They present a problem to your brain, and now it has something to grab onto and to grapple with while you make this solution. If you're a visual artist, the problem is you're working with this certain space that you're going to cover with your visual representation of the thing that you're creating. So you're dealing with the constraint of space. If you're a musician, you're dealing with the constraints of the principles of music, of harmony. There are notes that sound good together, and there are ones that don't. There's notes that create a certain emotional impact, and there are ones that create something else. And if you have an idea of what you want to create, then you're going to work with the constraints that are available to solve the problem, and that engages you in a way that is very useful and productive, and it allows you to make real things and not just stuff that has no entree into the real world, no hooks into reality. We can sit and do our own thing and hide our work in our closets, We can doodle and draw for our own benefit, and it can be a useful exercise. But if you're creating something with the intention of bringing it into the world, then it needs to solve a problem. And to make it, you have to include the problem in your thinking about the solution. And your focus on solving a problem with the work that you're doing is what's going to make it, is what's going to propel it into the market. So we celebrate the idea of a creative spark, and that's that moment when something comes together. Usually that moment is the result of a long process. Usually it's the result of a person who has sourced excellence. Whatever it is that they have, whatever it is they're making, they are familiar with the best of the best in that field. They understand the work of the masters that came before them. They understand the marketing campaigns that work beautifully. If they're a copywriter, they understand the best headlines to use. If whatever it is you do, whatever it is you're creating, there's someone that set a standard, and the people who have the breakthroughs are the ones who are deeply aware and have a deep understanding of the excellent work that's been done in their area. They also develop the skills that they need to communicate the idea. Now, you might not be able to make your idea a reality on your own. You might not be able to play all of the instruments, but you can hum the melody. You might not be able to code, but you can wireframe and spec so that you can communicate your idea and put yourself in a situation where you can bring other people in to make it real. The days are over when people can just sit back and scratch their chins and spout off ideas, and someone's going to run behind them and make it happen. For most of us, some of us might be on that level, but now the tools are available that you have to take responsibility to take those first steps to making your ideas real. So that's the thing I want to talk about most regarding creating ideas. The idea of being willing to go through the process of all the ideas that are bad, to suffer through that process, not to judge yourself, and then to embrace the constraints of your market, of the genre, because those constraints are going to be the handle or the hook that allows people to have access and understand and make sense of what you're creating. And nobody creates alone anymore. There's always going to be a point you reach where you're not going to be able to take your idea across the finish line. There's going to be other people who are going to be working with you to make it a reality. So the better you are at your part and the clearer you are at being able to communicate your idea and your vision, the better you are at mastering the tools of at least communicating clearly what it is that you want to create in the world, then the better chance you have of actually seeing it become something that's real. So tomorrow, or in session 26, we're going to go into the next stage of the creative process, which is production. Go to www.jaredforte.com/backstage, and you can get on the backstage access list. You'll get lots of additional resources and heads up on all the sessions that are coming up down the road. I hope you enjoyed today's session. I'll see you tomorrow afternoon.